This tourniquet fits into a magazine carrier. Hello, this is Raziel Cohen with ndftraining.com, and today we want to speak about tourniquets. Now, tourniquets is something that would be very beneficial for everyone to be able to carry around because it's far more likely that you might end up needing to use a tourniquet than it would be for you to end up using your firearm. And in the aspect of firearms, if you're going to be someone who carries a firearm, you also have to assume that there's a chance that you might need to use a tourniquet yourself. It's not a one-way street when it comes to you carrying a firearm. Although it's something that people don't often want to think about, since it's a two-way street, carrying medical for yourself and for people around you is just as important, if not more important, than carrying a firearm alone. Now, the available tourniquets that were available on the market up until this point have been pretty complex to be able to carry when it came to what we had available on the market because there weren't that many offerings. And the ones that were compromising size were then also compromising functionality or vice versa, which made it, again, not necessarily the most ideal thing to do. Now, although a lot of people might say that they would want to carry a cat tourniquet everywhere they go, again, for most people, that's not actually realistic, especially just based on the bare size of it. So this right here is a cat tourniquet. It is pretty much regarded as the gold standard when it comes to tourniquets that are available on the market today, and they work great. They're very functional, they work excellent, they have huge military background, huge law enforcement background. Pretty much anyone who carries a serious tourniquet will be carrying a cat tourniquet in some capacity. Now, there's a lot of companies that have been trying to remake this or redo this in some way to be able to either make it more concealable, easy to carry, but there has not really been any up until this point that have done it successfully. So this would be a cat tourniquet, which was one of the most common options that were available. But again, in regards to carrying it, you could see it is quite long, it is quite tall, and is not something that's easily concealable or comfortable to be able to be carried on a day-to-day basis. The next tourniquet that comes up is the SOF T Wide Tourniquet. Now, this is another tourniquet that can be folded a couple different ways, but it's a very loose material. It's still fairly thick. It has buckles and metal clamps, things like that. And this functions very similarly in concept to the cat tourniquet, but it does have kind of a little bit more going for it in regards to width and size. It also is much flatter when it comes to packing it up, so you could kind of carry this a little bit easier. I did bring this as an option. I tried carrying it for quite a while, but ultimately, again, it does become very cumbersome to be able to be carrying a tourniquet like this, because even though it is thinner, it is still thick, and there's not really a place you could put this into your pocket or carrying it in some way that would be realistic on an everyday use. Now, the idea is that everyday carry, although it should be something that I think we spoke about this expression before, comforting, not necessarily comfortable. If it's not comfortable at all, it usually means that a person will ultimately not carry it. You do want to be able to find an option that you would carry every single day, because if it's not comfortable, you'll often just decide, I'd rather not do it right now. It's not as important to me. So this continues the line of options of what would be able to be carried while not destroying or sacrificing functionality for what a tourniquet is supposed to be. The next tourniquet that came up, and I was using for a while as well, this is the rat tourniquet. Now, this was, to my understanding, a very controversial tourniquet because a lot of people who are professionals said you should absolutely not carry this. And pretty much what they said was, this is a tourniquet that's pretty much just a very thick rubber band almost. And the way it works is that you'd wrap it around your hand, you'll loop it through, and then you just start wrapping it around your arm. And then once you get to the end, it kind of locks into those little wings right over here, and that would be the tourniquet. Now, they did say that it might be more beneficial for children, and they gave kind of different reasons for why it would be beneficial. But ultimately, the reason why a lot of people stopped carrying these is because people said that it was kind of lacking in regards to functionality. So you were giving up proper functionality of what a tourniquet is supposed to be and ease of use and application, but for the size. Now, even for the size, although it is somewhat easier to be able to wrap around, for a long time what I was actually doing with this is I was wrapping this around my belt line, so it almost acted like as a secondary belt, not for any of the purposes of holding my pants up, but that's kind of the secret concealable way to have it wrapped around your body. In that way, it was still much easier to carry than these other options. But the question is if it was still sacrificing functionality for what a tourniquet was supposed to be. Now, all these tourniquets were also self-applicable. So this is how it came from the factory. This is what it came from North American Rescue. And when you wrap it, it's easier to do it single-handed and be able to apply it to someone else. Same thing with the SOF T Wide. They were able to be applied single-handed or to someone else very simply. But again, in regards to being able to have function and size, these were just not able to cut it. Along came the ETQ. Now this tourniquet is very interesting. This tourniquet is almost the exact same thing in regards to the style of the cat tourniquet, but they pretty much miniaturized it into a tiny little package. So much so that a big part of their advertising is that it's able to fit into a magazine carrier. Now, quick thing that I wanted to mention is that someone asked me about a Glock 19 versus a Glock 48. This is a Glock 48 magazine carrier, and you can see it still fits inside, which means it wasn't solely focused on the Glock 19 size, but even if you have a Glock 48 as your everyday carry, this will fit into that pouch. Now, there's a lot of pros and cons about this tourniquet, and I'm going to mention them today because it's important you understand what you're getting yourself into when you order one. The first thing I'll tell you in regards to carrying it, although it's able to fit into a magazine carrier, and I'm sure they're not advertising it this way, just be aware, it doesn't mean it should be there. The reason why I'm saying this is that if your muscle memory is to have your magazine on your left and your firearm on your right, you don't want it to be in a location where you'd commonly reload from, because if it gets to that point that you're doing that and you pull your tourniquet instead of your magazine, that's obviously a very bad situation to be in. So take that as just a size comparison of what you're able to do, as well as also see what available options you are able to carry a magazine in and carry it somewhere else. So if you usually carry a spare magazine in your appendix, you should move it maybe to the 3 o'clock position or the 6 o'clock position, somewhere else other than where your reload comfort is usually from, because I don't think it's a good replacement. Now, I know a lot of people might do that separately. If you train enough, I'm sure it'll be fine. You'll work it out. However, I would still say just be aware of the fact that if it's in your primary reload location, you don't want it to be a tourniquet after not training that a lot, because you don't want to accidentally draw a tourniquet instead of your spare magazine. So simply be aware of that. So in regards to size, it absolutely does fit in a spare magazine size container, a carrier, and it works really nicely. It functions very nicely. Now, in regards to the actual function, there are a few things that I kind of noticed off the bat. First of all, in regards to, again, the way that it's shaped and the way that they fold it, it's very compact and easy to use. You simply pull the strap and it opens up all the way, and then there's the tab there that's able to open it. One of the first things I ran into, which is something I'd consider, is that the webbing that they're using is just the webbing. There's no like durability to the actual webbing itself. What I mean that is that when you're applying it, let's say to an arm, you really need to make sure that it doesn't wrap over on itself, because then ultimately, if it's twisted, you're going to have a tighter point where it's not going to function the way a tourniquet's supposed to function. Since it's so loose and so like soft, you really need to make sure and double check that things are completely aligned the way you need them to be. Otherwise, you will not be applying the tourniquet correctly. Now, the other thing that took me a second to be able to practice is that this bar, the Windless, is actually has like the internal material folded on top of it. So I'm not sure if that's what the design concept for that is, because if I look at something like the cat tourniquet, you see that it's flat all the way through, so it's easier to see that it's actually level and done properly. So again, I'm not sure the design perspective on why they did it that way, but as of right now, it's folded over, and you have to, again, twist it in a way that would be beneficial. A part of the immediate benefits I saw to this is that something in regards to the cat is, you see, this is what's called staged. This is a correct way of having a tourniquet set up, which means that the actual strap that would hold the Windless in place after must be on the side, because what happens is that if it's closed in your tourniquet and then you realize that this is closed, you won't be able to get it locked in properly to stop the bleeding. Ultimately, you'd have to let go of the Windless, which means the blood would start flowing again, and it's a huge problem. Something like this, which is a great design, is simply kind of a carabiner that you push it in, it locks in place, and you're good to go, which I think is a brilliant idea. It should be something I think would be applied on more tourniquets, because creatively, that's a great idea. On the right side of the tourniquet, there is a glow stick that pretty much when you start applying pressure, it breaks, and you can see it's already glowing now because I was trying it out, and it pretty much will glow. Personally, I don't see much value there because maybe it is able to glow, but this is an everyday carry tourniquet, then it's mostly about being able to see it from a distance. So if they simply made the entire tourniquet orange, similar to the SOF T Tourniquet or some cat tourniquets that come like that, then I think orange as a bright color would be more beneficial than a glow stick. Again, if you're in the complete darkness, I could see why there's value, but if a person's not able to respond or say like I'm hit or something, maybe they're completely unconscious, I could get why potentially, but it's a very small thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have. They are replaceable. I just find it to have less value. Not saying it's bad, just something to consider. Now, here's where things also get interesting. When we're using a tourniquet, it usually means that you're dealing with an arterial bleed, which means there's a lot of blood that's coming out. Now, based on all the other medical professionals I've spoken to, the rough estimate in regards to completely bleeding out is around a minute and a half. A minute and a half is not a lot of time, which means that's why it's important for you individually to be trained, because you can't rely on other people within that time frame to have the right equipment and to be able to help you. A minute and a half is not a lot of time. Now, what's very cool about this tourniquet is on the back of the tourniquet, they actually have a QR code that anyone would be able to scan, and it'll load up a video of how how to apply a tourniquet. Now, if you don't see the problem already, there's a few variables that need to be considered when you make that design. The first thing will be, how good is your service in that area to load up the video as fast as possible? So you can't assume that your internet's going to be good enough. The second thing is that the video is over a minute long. And if it takes over a minute to be able to watch the video and learn how to apply it, that's not very beneficial. So although I think it's a good and cool thing to be able to add, I would consider that more for the training side pre-event, but not to really rely on someone post-event, because if you're already bleeding out, having that amount of time for them to learn how to use it under pressure is probably not going to be super helpful. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Again, I want to clarify. I'm just trying to give you guys like food for thought in regards to how would this actually be able to be used. So if we're going to play out a scenario, God forbid a person gets shot in the leg, they're shot in the thigh, and now they have huge arterial bleed that's coming out of their body. A person then has to see that happened, or the blood is already flowing at this point. They have to see that it happened, find the tourniquet, start applying it, but realize they might not know how to apply it, scan it, ensure that they have good internet to be able to load up the video, watch the video that's 1.5 minutes, and then be able to do it. Now, another small critique would be on the page that comes up with the video, there are a few videos of like how to restore it and how to reapply it, which I think is really cool. But the video that shows you how to use the tourniquet doesn't have the option to even speed up the video if you're able to do that. The other videos on the page do have the option that you could speed up and watch the video faster, but the video itself of how to apply it doesn't have that option, which means I couldn't even do that if I wanted to. So maybe on the small scale, maybe adding that as a feature would be beneficial. But they do have under the video itself kind of like do this, 3 steps. And if a person has a basic knowledge on how tourniquets work, then it probably would be fast enough for them doing that. But in regards to a person who doesn't have any training at all, it might be less valuable, because watching a 1.5 minute video on a type of artery bleed that could be completely over in 1.5 minutes may have pros and cons. Now, past that, they do also have a location where you could add the time. And again, they have scan for video. And on the tourniquet itself, just like on the website, there are the 3 steps of like how to be able to apply it, assuming you don't have time to watch the full video. Now, ultimately, what they said is that this is exactly the same as the cat tourniquet, because if you were to tear apart the cat tourniquet, the inner webbing of the tourniquet itself is the same thickness as what they have over here. So they're saying that technically it's the same thing. Now, my finishing thoughts that I think are important to mention. Is this a good option in regards to what's available on the market? Absolutely. If you're not going to carry a tourniquet, or you're going to carry this, absolutely carry this. To my understanding, they have not yet been approved by TCCC, which is like, I believe, the organization that will decide if this is usable for serious use. However, I can imagine it should be fine. I'm not a medical professional. Do your own research and make your own decision when it comes to carrying something like this. However, what I would say is that if you're not going to carry anything at all or carry this, absolutely carry this. If you could comfortably carry a cat tourniquet, carry a cat tourniquet, because they already have a huge track record and benefits to them that this might not have. I think this is a great option. I'm sure there's going to be maybe a 2.0 version or something else they're going to come out with in the future. They do also have a version that's slightly thicker. It will no longer fit into a magazine carrier at that point, I believe. But again, in regards to what this tourniquet is, I think it's brilliant. I think it's a great design. I'd be curious to see if they get approved by TCCC to really show that it's a valuable tourniquet. I think the features are awesome. No matter which tourniquet you have, training is mandatory to be able to learn how to use it. So you should get that regardless of the video, regardless of anything else. I really do think this is a very cool step in the right direction, and to be able to carry it in a magazine carrier is really cool. So I would recommend this if this is going to be something you would carry over the other options that you for sure would not carry. So if that's going to be your options, I think this is definitely a very good way, very good place to look. I'm going to leave more information in the description below if you're looking to check out their company, and any other information I'm able to find, I'll add there as well. This is Raziel Cohen with ndftraining.com. Thank you for watching.